Hello everyone, 5150 here. Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to the first installment of Storytime with 5150. Today's story is The Binding of Fenrir, or How Tyr Lost His Hand. Now, in Asgard, if something goes wrong, chances are Loki's to blame or has something to do with it. In this story, that's not exactly the case. In this story, the problem is Loki's son, Fenrir. Fenrir was the product of an affair between Loki and an ogre named Agrabode. Well, when Fenrir first came around, when he was a pup, he was cute. And all the gods just adored him. At any point in time, you could find one or more of the gods petting him or playing with him or giving him tasty little treats. But this didn't last really for very long because he began to grow at an alarming rate. It didn't take very long at all for him to grow into a full-grown, very heavily muscled wolf with the flashing black eyes of his father. One day, as Odin was wandering through the forest, taking a stroll as he liked to do, he found himself in the vicinity of Fenrir's lair, and he spotted Fenrir and watched him stalk and kill one of the giant boar that lived there in that area. He killed the thing with a single swipe of his monstrous claw, and then he devoured the thing whole. Bones, hooves, tusks, he just crunched it all up and swallowed it. Well, needless to say, Odin was a little concerned about this. So he went to consult the Norn. And they told him that Fenrir would not only cause great damage to Asgard, but Fenrir would also kill Odin himself, along with a number of other gods, if he was not controlled. So Odin immediately ordered a chain, a huge chain made of toughened steel. The chain's name was Loding. And since Thor was off fighting giants, his favorite pastime, the job of hobbling Fenrir came to Tyr, the god of war, the bravest and, besides Loki, the most cunning of all the gods. So Tyr set off towards Fenrir's lair with Loding over his shoulder. When he finally found Fenrir, he was very surprised to find that he was now no longer the size of a full-grown wolf. He was now the size of a large shire horse. So Tyr says, "Little wolf cub, I have a game for us to play. You see this little chain that I found? As a test of strength, I'll bet you can't break it." Well, Fenrir sat patiently while Tyr bound him with this chain, wrapped it around his neck and around his legs, and when he made the final connection and finally secured the chain, he stepped back and said, "Okay, go ahead." To which Fenrir stood up, and the chain broke in about 12 different places. To which Fenrir replied, "That was nothing." So when Tyr told Odin about this, Odin was understandably not happy. So he ordered a second chain be made. A chain with links as big as a strong man's wrist. This chain was called Dromi. So Tyr set off with Dromi and most of the gods in tow. You see, they didn't really believe that Tyr was completely forthright with them. They thought maybe he exaggerated. And some of them even thought that he didn't fasten the chain properly, and that's why it came off. So they were going to follow to make sure the job was done right. When they found Fenrir this time, they were all quite dismayed to find that he had now grown to the size of a dragon ship. So Tyr says to Fenrir, "Little wolf cub, remember that game of ours? Look, I found another chain. I'll bet you can't break this one." Well, Fenrir took a look at it and said, "Okay, let's give it a try." So he again sat patiently while Tyr wrapped the chain around his neck and his legs and bound him. And then when he made the last connection and finally secured the chain, Fenrir kind of wriggled a little bit, like the chains were uncomfortable. Then he laid his muzzle on his paws, and he watched the Asgardians for a few minutes. Well, they were beginning to clap each other on the back and shake each other's hand and look awfully happy. "Oh, look, see, we've done it. We've controlled Fenrir. Everything's going to be just fine now." And when most of them had relaxed, all except Tyr and Odin, that is, Fenrir let out a long, baleful howl and then leapt to his feet, showering the ground with broken links and broken pieces of chain. It was not a pretty sight. The walk back to Asgard for the gods was a thoughtful one. Fenrir was a problem that was already looking like they couldn't solve, and everyone was convinced that if they didn't, someone was going to get killed. The best metal workers in existence are the dwarves. The dwarves live in the land of the Light Elves. So Odin sent Skimir to see Gerador. Gerador is the master of the dwarven smiths. He is the best. He is also a very powerful magic user. So Skimir explains the situation, and Gerador thinks for a moment, and he says, such a problem. Such a problem will require very, very strong magic and a good deal of time to complete. So Skimir, as he was instructed, went away and came back a month later. And his dismay was quite obvious when Gerador presented him with a length of silk rope. To which Skimir exclaimed, "A length of silk rope? This will never bind Fenrir. I can't take this back to the gods." At which time Gerador poured him a goblet of elven mead, took a sip of his own, and said, "Don't be fooled by appearances. Not everything is as it appears. This is a magic rope. It took this long to make because I've had to find 6 very special components. I've had to find the spit of a bird, the fear of a bear, the roots of a mountain, a woman's beard, the sound of a cat's footsteps, and the breath of a fish." "What?" replied Skimir. "Breath of a fish, beard of a woman? These things are completely impossible. They don't exist." To which Gerador replied, "Of course they don't, stupid. That's why they're so hard to get." Skimir was still not convinced, but he returned to Asgard with the rope. When he arrived, he got, as he expected, the derision of the gods. Darn near started a fight. But Odin spoke up, silenced everyone, and said, "Stop. I know Gerador's reputation. If he says the rope will bind Fenrir, it will." So the gods assembled, and they decided they were going to go north to the wasteland beyond Asgard. So they went and got Tyr and asked him to go along, and Fenrir, well, he figured he had nothing to fear from the Asgardians because of how big he was. So he agreed to go along as well. They traveled north until they came to a lake called Amsfardnir. There they boarded a ferry and crossed to the island in the middle of the lake called Lyngvi. Now, they wanted to stop at Lyngvi because they have, on that island, there are these huge, very juicy, very tasty ox. They're great when you roast them. Well, Fenrir says, I prefer my meat hot, bloody, and raw. But I'm hungry, so let's go. So the gods, they found and slaughtered an ox and set it to roasting. And while this was happening, they were dismayed to see that Fenrir had jumped on, killed, and devoured at least 24 of the beasts while they were working on their one. When everyone was done eating and Fenrir was full, and quite frankly, so were the gods, Tyr says, little wolf pup, remember that game of ours? Well, I hope your snack has left you feeling strong because I found this rope here that none of the gods can break. Well, Fenrir looked at it and said, that? You want me to break that? It's a shoelace. That won't increase people's fear of me. That won't increase my reputation at all. Skip it. Well, after that, each of the gods, in turn, commenced to try to convince Fenrir to let Tyr bind him. Well, Fenrir has the cunning of a wolf and the blood of his father flowing through his veins. He knew it was a trap. He could smell it. To which he said, no, forget it. Well, then Odin stepped forward and said, now look, Fenrir, if you let us bind you with this rope and you can't break free, well, then we'll know you're not as strong as everyone says you are. And we'll let you go because we'll know you're not a threat to us. How about that? Come on, Fenrir. What, are you afraid? Does this little rope frighten the mighty Fenrir? Please. To which Fenrir replied, I don't trust you Asgardians, and I don't like this idea. However, I am not afraid. So you can bind me with your rope on one condition, that one of you put his right hand in my mouth, so that if I can't escape, I have some insurance that you will untie me. Well, all the gods knew what this meant. They all knew that if he couldn't break free, they were not going to release him. Tyr stepped forward and said, little wolf pup, all this fuss over a game. I'll tell you what, I'll play if you will. And Tyr stepped up and placed his right hand in the mouth of Fenrir. Now he knew, like all the other gods, what would happen if Fenrir could not get free. But you see, Tyr is the god of war. He embodies the sacrifice of the soldier. He knew he was offering his right hand, his sword hand, to keep the other Asgardian gods safe. And he is a soldier, so he did what he had to do. Well, they bound Fenrir, and when the last knot was tied, they challenged him to get free. And he pulled and he strained and he struggled, but the more he struggled, the tighter the ropes became, until a couple of times he actually whined in pain, until he was finally forced to concede defeat. He said, okay, I can't get free. Release me now. To which all the gods started laughing, all except one. All except Tyr, because he knew what was coming. And sure enough, Fenrir's jaws snapped shut, severing Tyr's wrist, and Fenrir swallowed his hand, and then began howling his dismay at having been tricked and tied up. Well, Odin took a piece of chain as big as Dromi had been and passed it through the ropes that tied Fenrir, and then attached it to a long stake and drove the stake down deep into the granite floor of the island. Then they took a huge boulder and they set it on the stake so that no one could dig it up. Meantime, Baldur was tending to Tyr's bloody stump, and Baldur got it bound up properly so that it stopped bleeding. Oh, there was blood everywhere. It was a heck of a scene. And Fenrir began howling for help because he did have allies. Not many, but if someone came and released him, it would have been very bad for the gods. So Tyr took his sword in his left hand and jammed it into Fenrir's mouth, the pommel digging into his lower jaw and the tip right against his palate. So he couldn't close his mouth and he couldn't howl. And oh, he was angry. The look of anger in Fenrir's eyes would have killed a mortal man. But there he sits to this day, bound and staked on the island of Lyngvi. And that's what you do with a giant wolf. Well, that's the end of our story for today. Thank you for tuning in. 5150 out.